So I've been scared to do this video for a while. I'm not used to putting myself out there, but I feel like it's something I wanted to say and I feel like I want to share it. I designed a statue. So I saw the statue that was put up in Times Square, and then I also realized that same exhibition was put up in Piazza Uffizi in Florence, which is a beautiful plaza. Like, it's a beautiful, beautiful plaza. And when I see the statue in Times Square in Piazza Uffizi, I felt sad. Okay, I understand the message behind the statue, where the goal is we want to highlight the everyday person, the normal day-to-day life and the mundane, and celebrating the mundane. And I feel like that's a big mistake, and I feel like that's super sad to see. Art used to be something you aspire to become. It's supposed to give you hope, and it's supposed to show you what beauty is so you can try to get closer to that. That's what art used to be. Art used to be our potential and how we can get closer to that every single day. And I feel like a lot of people are just fed up with this shit, to where you look at modern art museums and it's literally shit. Like, dude, I went to one in San Antonio, the McNay Art Museum, and they had an exhibition, and the art piece was a long table which was inspired by, it was like a Victorian beautiful table that had like guts and like heart and blood and like animal pieces on it. It looked like shit and it wasn't beautiful. And it was just a protest against like high class and, you know, the establishment. You know, we understand that, but it sucks. It's freaking awful. It wasn't beautiful. You go there pretending it's fucking beautiful because you want to analyze the message behind it. And dude, it's not pretty. It doesn't look good, right? And that's the point, right? But it still sucks. And I think all of us are tired of it. Piazza Uffizi in Florence, like, I saw this video explaining it, and I went there, right? So I lived on a farm. I lived on a goat farm in Tuscany for a month, and then it was like 40 minutes from Florence. So I went to Florence, and I went to this Piazza Uffizi. So from what I understand, the story of Medusa, for example. So you have a couple statues there. You have the Fountain of Neptune, a beautiful fountain, and then you have Perseus. I think it's pronounced Perseus or Perseus, I don't know. He's holding Medusa's head, right? That's another statue. And they're facing each other, right? So the statues by itself are beautiful, but then they also face each other. I think the story of Medusa is that I think Poseidon raped Medusa, and then something happened, but that was like they were lovers at one point or something like that, right? But there's context there between Poseidon, which is also Neptune for the Romans, and Medusa. And you can see that the statue of the Fountain of Neptune is looking over at Medusa, and then you see Perseus, I don't know how to pronounce it, he's holding Medusa's head. And Medusa's head is looking straight at Neptune. And obviously Neptune is made out of stone. It's a beautiful play on not only the individual statues, but even the position has depth. And even the position on where these statues are located has meaning. And if you notice, you know, David by Michelangelo, there's like 3 layers at least of depth and meaning within one statue. One, it's a beautiful statue and amazing craftsmanship, obviously, right? The beauty of David is that all of the art before that statue depicting David versus Goliath was David, after he killed Goliath, he has his head, like Goliath's head, like pretty much similar to Percy, but that's not the point. But after he killed Goliath, it's like this, it's this moment where you're celebrating defeating this, gargantuan task, amazing, right? Michelangelo said that's not the most interesting part of the story. The most interesting part of David versus Goliath is right before he kills him. Because that's the moment of fear, that's the moment of doubt, and that moment requires the most bravery, which is a very, very deep feeling, and it's a very real feeling, right? UFC fighters, the most exciting part of the fight sometimes, and where your heart's racing the most, is when you have one fighter on one side of the octagon and another fighter on the other side of the octagon. They're looking at each other, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you know that in 10 seconds those guys are going to see who's gonna take control of the cage, who's gonna assert their dominance in that fight, and your heart's just beating. Like any UFC fan or any boxing fan knows that moment right before they fight, it's a very real moment. It's a very vulnerable moment, because they're leaving it all on the line in that moment. And that same moment is what Michelangelo wanted to express in David, in that statue. He hadn't killed Goliath yet. If you look at the face of David, there's a face, it's almost like it's half courage, to where he's looking in the distance. He goes, I'm going to kill this motherfucker. And he's slightly afraid. Like you can see he's afraid. And it's the courage that David has. And isn't that the whole part of the story? Is the courage and the bravery that someone can have against a huge challenge and a huge adversary. Like that's a beautiful part of David, right? There's layers of depth, and we can learn something, we can draw inspiration from that. And we have drawn inspiration from that for thousands of years. And then you see this statue in New York, and then you just look at it, and there's nothing. It just is what it is. And it doesn't make you feel anything hopeful. It doesn't make you, want to look more into it. There's not layers of depth. It's very well made. It's a very well made statue. And the one in Florence was well made as well. And the one in Florence got me even more pissed, because it's right in the middle of that plaza. And that's a beautiful plaza. You have a copy of the David by Michelangelo in that same plaza. I think you have a statue of Gian Bologna, which is a beautiful freaking statue of Hercules defeating the centaur, which is also part of a story that I totally forgot. And I think that there's a statue of him there. And it's a plaza where you go there, and you go there at night, and it's just so beautiful. And there's so many layers of history and beauty within one block, and it's absolutely crazy. And what I felt when I was there was that I'm very stupid. Like, I felt extremely humbled, and you feel like you don't know anything about the world, because the amount of knowledge and truth and beauty within one square, one block, is crazy. It's just crazy. And you realize you only understand 1% of the true meaning behind everything. In Florence in general, when you're just, I was riding my bike around Florence, and you see everything, and then you go to the museums, you feel really dumb, because you don't understand what's happening. You can just admire it. And I was just admiring it. I wanted to understand everything. So I decided to say, instead of just complaining, let me try to create something. So I went on Fiverr, and I got a 3D modeling person. And I don't know anything about sculptures, right? I don't know anything about it. But I looked up what makes classical sculptures so beautiful. And part of it is a concept called contrapposto. And contrapposto is the asymmetrical display of the human body in terms of weight, right? So we rarely see a human body being perfectly symmetrical in the way they distribute their weight, right? If I'm sitting down normally, I'm sitting down like this. My weight is shifted, right? Very rarely, and that's why when people stand super straight when they're working, you can tell because it stands out because they're very straight, right? A lot of these statues, they have their hips on, the weight is on one hip. It's a very dynamic pose because it's natural, right? It's a natural way to look at the human body. That's how human bodies are most of the time when we look at someone. Look at someone today and notice how their weight is always shifted on one side. It's never 100% straight. If you look at Egyptian statues, they're all straight, right? They're all just like this, looking forward. It's not a dynamic statue, and it makes it a little bit more boring, in my opinion, just on the visual aspect, right? Those statues are also very beautiful as well for other reasons. But you look at Roman statues and they're very dynamic, and part of the Renaissance was understanding the human body to a level we've never understood it before. Before the Renaissance, we didn't understand as much than we do now, right? Regarding the human body. So that's one thing I realized in the statues. One, it needs to have some contrapposto. And two, who's the statue? Like, who's gonna do this? And I realized, and I've always thought that the modern day gladiators, who are the people today that I look up to, that I seek inspiration from, that I admire, and that changes the way I look at life sometimes, and it's honestly UFC fighters and UFC champions, right? I look at Georges St-Pierre, Anderson Silva. I look at Chael Sonnen. I look at Conor McGregor when he was coming up. I look at Demetrius Johnson. I look at John Jones. You know, even with all the stuff that's happening right now. I look at Habib, I look at Ilia Topuria, I look at Alex Pereira, I look at Stephen Thompson, I look at these amazing fighters that represent values that are displayed on the cage, in the cage, and represents everything they've done beforehand, and also just reveals what type of person they are, right? So I decided to do this one with Georges St-Pierre. And the reason I did that was because Georges St-Pierre expressed that he was afraid before every fight. He was afraid before every fight. That is the same concept that Michelangelo wanted to express with David. He was not without fear. And it's the same concept. And I respect immensely someone who is afraid but still goes out there and puts himself out, and you know, is willing to lose and get knocked out, and you still do it, and it's acting in spite of fear. Even this video, for me, I'm very afraid to do this video, but I decided I should do it anyways. And that also inspired me to make this and to put myself out there, because I've never done that before. And then so also Georges St-Pierre, even after retiring from the UFC, he represents discipline, because he's in great shape. So he represents someone that has a lot of discipline. He still works out like crazy, trains every day, most days. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. And everyone who knows him says he's a great, amazing person. So he represents discipline. He represents courage. The bandana that he wore, which I believe is a Japanese bandana, I also don't know what the name is, represents the exact same thing. It represents the will of the warrior in the moment of battle to have courage despite fear. So he embodies that. And he embodies that in a real person, modern day. And again, this is the same concept by David. This is really, for me, very deep stuff. And again, it inspires me to become better, and it inspires me to face my fears. So what's the elements of the statue that I made? So one, we put the bandana on there because it represents that. Okay. Two, we did a contrapposto pose, right? The photo that got inspiration from the pose is a photo in that same moment where he's facing his opponent in the octagon. I don't know what fight that's from, but again, it's the same moment from David. It's right before David kills Goliath, and it's right before Georges St-Pierre is fighting for the belt again, right? So the inspiration is directly from that fight, and it's for me, it's the best Georges St-Pierre photo ever. And behind Georges St-Pierre, you have Firas Zahabi, you have John Danaher behind them. Like, it's a legendary photo. It's amazing photo. So we got inspiration from that pose. We had to fix a couple things because the knees were bent inwards, so we had to make it look normal. It looked a little bit too feminine in the beginning. I can show that part. And then the other thing I want to do is the podium. The podium where he's standing on, it has to be a very simple and not rustic, but it has to be a very simple and just a simple podium. It can't be too elaborate. It can't be too ornamented, because that doesn't represent sophistication. We're not trying to talk about sophistication in this statue. We're trying to talk about a simple masculine expression and moment, right? So for example, it's hard to explain this. So you have the Greek columns, you have Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The Corinthian, which is most elaborate with like the flowers, it's based on the proportion of a girl or a young woman, which is the height is 9 times in diameter, because Greeks, they saw a young woman and you see the foot, the actual foot of the woman, and then you multiply that foot by 9 and you get the height of a young woman, right? So it represents the sophistication and the beauty of a young woman. So it's more elaborate, right? It represents more of a feminine quality to it. That's why a lot of beautiful buildings use Corinthian statues. And then you have Doric statues, which is the opposite, which is a 1:7 proportion, which is the height is 7 times the diameter, because they look at a man in Greece and they measure the foot height 1:7. And it represents a very masculine ideal, in the sense that the definition of masculine here that we're using is of simplicity and humility, and not from excess, right? So if you have a statue of Hercules, he doesn't represent, beautiful excess and sophistication. Hercules was not a sophisticated figure. He was a very simple, humble, hardworking figure. So you use a Doric column, right? So the podium has to be something very simple, right? It's still beautiful in its own sense, but it can't be too elaborate, because that's not what we're trying to talk about here. Then the last element of this pose is, instead of just copying the photo where he's looking this way, he has one hand, he has both hands, I think, in the fist, but we decided to do this a little bit different. We decided his left hand is going to be like this, right? Also inspired from classical Greek statues, a very delicate hand with the UFC belt, almost as if he's letting go of the UFC belt, right? Because as soon as, and a lot of people have said it, as soon as you step into that octagon when you're a champion, you're not a champion anymore. And you have to be willing to sacrifice your record and to sacrifice the UFC belt in that moment. Now you're just a regular person fighting another regular person, and both have to fight again to become the new champion. That's why a title defense is so important, because you have to do the same challenge that got you the belt in the first place. You have to do that over and over and over and over again. And every time you walk into that octagon, you have to let go of your previous belt. You have to emotionally be willing to let it go, and you have to start all over again in that fight. And that fight can be brutal, and you have to win that belt again. It's not yours. The moment you step in, it's not yours. So it's a symbolic representation of, as you're walking into the cage, you let go of your belt, right? So we wanted to add that in. everything in this statue has a purpose and has an intention, has a meaning. We go back to Times Square, we go back to the same, not the same statue, it's a different statue, but the same exhibit in Piazza Uffizi, Florence. What's the intentionality behind every element, right? Everything has to have a purpose. And then I did research before this, and Georges St-Pierre already has a statue in his hometown. The statue sucks. It's a terrible statue. You can tell that the people that commissioned the statue, that paid for the statue, obviously they love Georges St-Pierre and it represents their thing. The guy who made the statue couldn't give a fuck. Does not care about Georges St-Pierre. Does not know anything about him. You can just tell. Why? Because he looks like a boxer. First off, he looks like a boxer. And then we're talking about contrapposto. It's literally the most stiff stance you can put in a statue. He's just like this, like he's a freaking boxer. It's the worst statue ever. It sucks. And I don't know why, but there's a trend where these bronze statues are being shown to athletes, and athletes, like, they have to act like they like it when they know it sucks. And you know it sucks. Like he did a video, they came out with a video showing Georges St-Pierre the statue, a person revealing the statue. Obviously you have to act respectful and you have to be grateful. Like, dude, if anyone does a statue of you, obviously, like, thank you. Like, you have to show respect. Dude, you can tell he's like low-key, like, dude, what is this? And it's not awful. Like, it's a statue, but for me it just sucks. It's super ugly. So that's where I want to show with this statue. This is a statue from love and care and intentionality behind every part of this statue, and there's layers within this statue as well. And we need to bring beauty back. Like, we need to bring beauty back, and this is so important to do. Like, we have to do this. And if we don't bring beauty back, there's a problem to where the future generations, they don't even know what beauty is. They'll have no idea what makes something beautiful. And then that's where you get people not understanding where they are in the world, because they're being sold something, and because you don't have a point of reference of beauty and truth, you're just going to be sold whatever, you know. Nowadays we have ugly clothes, we have ugly cars. Most cars nowadays are ugly. We have ugly houses. We have chain restaurants from people who don't give a fuck about the food they make. Tim Dillon was talking about Ruth's Chris being designed by a board of directors and people in suits looking at statistics and analyzing data to make food. It's sad. It's super sad. And if you don't have beauty to contrast that, that's all you'll know for your whole life. And you will never appreciate the joy and the dopamine that you'll get when you see something absolutely beautiful. And it just makes life amazing. If you ever feel like you're part of the Matrix, you know, I talk about being part of the Matrix. If you ever feel like you're being part of the Matrix and that people are just using you to make money off of you in your job, or to sell you stuff, or, you know, don't care about you as a human, the antithesis to that of the Matrix, however you want to call it, is beauty. It is beauty. Because beauty says you're not just a person to work and make money. No, you're much more than that, right? You're meant to enjoy nature and to appreciate life and to eat food that was done by someone who loves to cook. And it's not, the goal of it isn't to make a lot of money. The goal of it isn't to be more productive, and it isn't to be more efficient. It's just to appreciate it for what it is. And it's a big part of what makes us human. It's a huge part of what makes us human. I'm sorry if this is too abstract, but this is truly what I feel, and I feel like in this video I have to express my true emotions, and I might be wrong in everything I'm saying, so please correct me, and I'm willing to learn, because I've never made a statue before, and I've never made a video like this before, and the only thing I ask is, I feel like if things are of value, they'll eventually spread over time. So if you're watching this video and you like anything I'm showing you, and you work for the UFC, and you can send it and you can show it to someone higher up so we can do something about it. Like, I would love to make this statue a reality. We need 50 grand probably if you want to make a marble statue. So we need to raise money for it, or we need to have someone who just puts in 50 grand. Like, if you know Joe Rogan, for example, and you can send this to him and he can put 50 grand and make a beautiful statue of someone that we all admire, and that we can all look at something beautiful and appreciate. Or if you know Faraz Sahabi, which was GSP's coach, make this, like, get this statue to him, show him this video. If anyone has any contacts in the UFC that can get this up, to show them this, and we can hopefully make this a reality, I would be the happiest person ever. And I think it'd be a step in the right direction to creating a place where we can look at beauty again, and we can find hope, right? Please show this to anyone who can finance this and can support this. Even just share it, you know? And I feel like this is a message that we need to share. I'm ranting too much, so sorry. That's it. I guess that's the end of the video. Let me think if there's anything else I need to say. No, that's it. All right, cool.